Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am delighted today to have a wonderful guest talking with us about mental wellness and also what to do about when you personally experience it or a loved one. And what are some of the things that you can do to positively move through that? A really authentic, genuine look at a personal, deeply personal experience that I'm so grateful he is willing to share. Drew Young is with us today. Hi, Drew. Thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Connie. Thanks for having me.
Again, like I said, your authenticity is just fabulous. It's beautiful. I've read the book and it's just wonderful. And before I get
Thank you.
into all of the good nitty gritties and juicies there, I'm just going to give you the official lead in case people are not yet aware of who you are. Drew Young studied at Brigham Young University, where he actually helped in teaching and developing curriculum courses for student development. And he's also serving as a publicity manager at Franklin Covey, where he assists in managing best-selling book launches. Good thing, because that's coming in handy for you.
I know, right?
For printing, social media campaigns, as well as booking high-profile thought leaders, storytellers, and celebrities for On Leadership. That's the fastest growing and largest leadership development online newsletter in the world. So no stranger to this environment. And I think it's amazing that you've ended up, having this beautiful new sold out best-selling book. I'm sure you didn't even see this trajectory and, as far as how this was all going to play out, because you've been interested in helping with mental wellness and all of that for a long time. How did that come about? Why was that something that was interesting to you?
Well, I think it started because I had to go through it myself. I grew up with separation anxiety, which is a bit taboo. I mean, to a lot of different people. Some people think, it's just like homesickness or whatever. But for me, it just kind of manifested itself in a lot of panic and fear. And then as I got older, particularly right before I turned 20, I went through an event that, is based off of my book. We'll probably talk a little bit about it, but it left me with severe and debilitating anxiety and depression. And so I had to learn for myself, going through the difficulties of, therapy and medication and suicidal thoughts, and basically just the lowest of lows, to understand, this is a topic that isn't talked about enough and isn't talked about in the light that it deserves. And especially by my generation. And I think a lot of people, especially now with, what's going on in the world, it's a lot more applicable, and it's a lot more, okay to talk about, because so many people are going through it. And so this is kind of my mission, to talk about things that are a little bit taboo, a little bit culturally misunderstood, but to bring it to light and to allow people to feel like, one, they're good enough, two, that, they matter, and three, that regardless of the challenges they face, that they have a mission in life and they can fulfill it.
Absolutely. And I love how it's opening up this dialogue. It's lessening the stigma of talking about mental illness, mental wellness, mental health, and really addressing it with especially the conditions of our day. That it is almost surprising if you're not experiencing something like this, because I remember our therapist talking about, we live in a schizophrenic world, which is, it induces that because of the way that things are. And I thought, that's interesting that, the norms are just so different and they go so against our grain. So take us through, the book is called The Meaning of Your Mission. Take us through what happened as you went out on your mission. Did you start to feel fingerlings of, man, this is going to be a problem? Or was it just the usual, I'm going out to do something new and I'm a little nervous and that kind of thing? What were some of the things that kind of led up to this experience for you? And then I want to talk about how what you've gone through has helped you with being able to dissipate the stigma of the mental illness. So kind of take us through, you were getting your mission call and that kind of thing. How did this all come about?
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, I mean, I grew up like a lot of, male members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with not only the expectation, but the desire to serve a full-time mission. And, it was something that my dad had done, my brothers had done, my friends were doing. So I was just kind of like, oh, I'm going to do this. And I felt like I had, the ability to do it, as well as the desire. And so obviously, as I talked about before, I had this kind of thing in the back of my mind, separation anxiety. Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to leave my family for 2 years in an unknown location, whatever. But, I thought to myself, I got this, we've heard the phrase over and over and over again within the church, whom the Lord calls, he qualifies. And so I thought, oh, he'll qualify me. I'll be all good. This is going to be great. And so I received my mission call, and my assignment was the Baltic mission, Estonian speaking, which is in, Northwestern Europe. And, it gets very dark during the winter months. Sun goes down to, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then in the summer months, it doesn't go down until 2, 3 in the morning. So it's very different culturally, obviously the language, just, geographically, and everything is just a lot different than, the United States. And so first of all, I thought to myself, okay, this is exciting. Not many people, at least that I knew of, got called to, Europe in general, especially that location. So I thought, okay, the Lord has a plan for me. He has a mission for me. And so I was going to go to the MTC, Missionary Training Center, on January 28th, 2015. And so that's really where, my story starts. I got to the MTC, and as I said, in the back of my mind was this kind of, separation anxiety thing, but, I got over it when I was in high school. I hadn't had any issues. I went to a semester of college beforehand. Everything was great.
So you did all those steps, the preparation, you're aware of it, you're really taking care of business, and you're ready to move.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was something that I didn't even, obviously it was something that was there, but it wasn't, a big deal to me. I thought I could do this thing. So as I got into the MTC, about, 2 or 3 days into the experience, I was going to be there for 9 weeks. So 2 or 3 days into the experience, I started to feel a little bit off. And I thought to myself, well, this is kind of normal. New language, new classroom, new teachers, new companions, new everything. A lot of stress, a lot of expectation. I thought, okay, this is normal that I'm feeling this way. I'll just keep pushing forward and, gonna get past it, just like I've gotten past every other challenge that I had experienced so far in my life. And, week 1 goes by, week 2 goes by, week 3, I started to really experience emotions and feelings and physical limitations that I'd never had before in my life. I started to gain an unusual amount of weight. I started to experience really bad panic attacks for like the first time in my life, where I would get really jittery and have a really fast heart rate. I lost my appetite, and I started to see a therapist there at the MTC. First time that I'd seen a therapist in my life, but it was the best hour of the week, because she and I would just have this really kind of down to earth but heartfelt conversation one with another, where I thought to myself, okay, she is the only person that actually gets me. This was 5 years ago, and within, the Latter-day Saint culture and just, Utah culture in general, it wasn't normalized to the point where, you can talk about therapy, you can talk about mental illness and not feel like, oh, people are going to judge you or people understand. It was really quite a subject of, oh, just push through it. Oh, stop being a baby and pick yourself back up. It's not a big deal. And to be completely honest, that's what I had thought of it as well before I experienced it myself. So I'm really glad that I got to go through it so that I stopped having that false mindset. But, she would kind of counsel me and help me and walk me through some things, techniques, and, breathing exercises and whatnot. And she just said, oh, you're homesick. You're going to get through this. You're like a lot of other missionaries that I see. It'll be okay. And then, week 4, week 5, week 6 goes by, and my condition continued to deteriorate. And I was just miserable. Honestly, it was the first time in my life that I had understood the scripture, the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak, where I absolutely wanted to be there. I absolutely wanted to serve. I absolutely wanted to fulfill my mission that I thought the Lord had called me to. But regardless of how hard I tried, it just wasn't something that I had the ability to do physically, emotionally, mentally. And so she said, okay, well, we're going to get you to the head doctor and we're going to get you prescribed medication. So she set me up with an appointment with the head doctor at the MTC. And he basically said, okay, well, we're going to put you on some fast acting antidepressants. And for anyone that's ever taken, antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication before, it's usually anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks from the start of taking it to where you actually start seeing any type of, positive results. And he actually had me on 3 medications in 5 weeks.
Oof.
So it did a lot to my, emotional psyche. It did a lot to me physically. It did a lot to me, motivationally. And it was just something that was hindering me in a way that I thought to myself, okay, well, this is nothing I've experienced before in my life. I didn't plan for this at all. I didn't expect this at all. What's going to happen to me? And so about week 8, the therapist and I were sitting down, and she said, you know what, Elder Young, she said, I think I finally understand what's going on. You're not homesick. You're not, you don't want to leave. You don't want to give up. You're on the Titanic and you're going down fast. And it was a huge wake-up call to me. In a sense, it was extremely lifting, because I thought, okay, she understands me, maybe this means I can get the help that I need. But it was also very scary, where, it was raised, you might have to go home. You might have to go get better and seek more treatment for what you're going through. And I didn't want to do that, because there was such a stigma, not only around mental illness, but, coming home from your mission early and, breaking an expectation that you had set with, friends, family, everything, parents. And, finally week 9 got there, and the medical committee at the MTC evaluated my psychiatric progress. And they basically just sat down with the therapist, the doctor, kind of talked about everything. And they came to the consensus, Elder Young needs to return home. He needs to get better, and we'll see if he can come back out in a couple months. And so long story short, they took me into one of the offices there where the district president was. And this was the day before my zone, also known as, all the other missionaries that were there with me, were going to go out to their respective mission assignments, in Europe. And he called me in, he said, we're going to send you home. And he said, we need to call your parents. And I said, well, I want to tell my dad. I didn't want him telling my dad. My dad and I had a special bond, and I always wanted my dad to be proud of me. And I mentioned this story in the book, and I do it for a specific reason, because we all have moments in our lives where we've built this expectation up with other people. And we really want to make someone proud. We really want to fulfill the assignment, the calling, the mission, whatever it is, the job that we've been given. And I mentioned in the book that, I call my dad. I say, hey, Dad, how's it going? He says, how's it going? I say, I'm fine. I say, well, they're going to send me home to get better. And it was an audible pause on the telephone, which seemed like forever, but it was probably only 5 seconds. And then he said, well, all right then. And, to this day, my dad and I have a great relationship, but it was one of those moments where I'd never felt like I'd let somebody down more in my entire life.
Sure.
And
especially when you're feeling so vulnerable and waiting to know that response of, am I going to feel validated and loved and accepted still? The one thing I want to point out is I loved in the book that you say right there, right now, you're probably judging my dad, and stop it. Just stop it. And I thought that was beautiful, because I'm sure he's worried about what he's going to say and not do anything that's going to hurt your feelings, and wants to get more information, all of that. And I love the fact that you give him that space and let him have that time to respond as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And honestly, it wasn't just like hard for me. It was hard for everybody, because I had never gone through this in my life, which means, my parents had never really experienced it. My friends, my family, my ward, everyone who cared about me, who, I had this expectation with, they didn't know how to handle it, because they just thought, oh, Drew's great. He's going to go serve this mission. He's going to do this thing. And so I don't blame people for how they responded, because even though it was difficult, even though it was hard, even though I felt extremely judged and misunderstood at times, they were really just responding the way that they'd been taught by, leaders, friends, whatever. And so that's when I really decided, okay, we need to change this. We need to change how we're taught and how we're, conditioned to understand what it's like when someone is struggling with, who cares if it's an addiction? Who cares if it's same-sex attraction? Who cares if it's mental illness? Something that's misunderstood or judged improperly or unfairly, we need to talk about it in a very open, very loving way, because that's the only way that, a situation like mine can happen. And instead of ostracizing the person or coming across like, oh, you did something wrong, it's instead, substituted with, oh my gosh, how's it going? I love you. Like, what can I do for you? Do you want to go get some dinner? Do you want to grab some lunch? Listen, I had a friend who went through the exact same thing. I know you're going to be okay. It's really hard right now, but I got your back 100%. That's how we need to change things.
I think that's beautiful how you bring that up. And I love the word that I keep hearing from you, which is expectation. And I think that's a key piece in this of there is an expectation from yourself. There's an expectation of other people. There's an expectation of how you are going to respond to something. And there's an expectation of what is normal. And I think that's shifting to a degree of moving from judging unrighteously often and unintentionally, but moving to compassion and just responding first with compassion. Tell me, let's go to thank you so much for sharing that tender experience. You come home and you say in the book, it's hard. There are times it's hard. Someone immediately tweets when they see you in the driveway, which was so not helpful.
I
Like,
know,
I think
right?
that's a little FYI for everyone of what not to do.
Stay
That's
off social media.
hello. Let them have their own story. But I love that you move immediately to here's some tools, just like you were saying, how can we change this dialogue? So you kind of address some different cultural things that you feel are not as helpful and you would love to see shift. What are some things that you hope your book or your story will help change culturally? What are some of those specific things you're hoping to see change?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and this is so hard to do, and I completely understand that, I'm asking something that's hard for people to do, and that is gossip. I talk a lot about it because as human beings, we're automatically, and thank goodness we're just curious, we like to know what's going on with people. We like to know kind of the behind the scenes of people's lives. We like to be in the know. And, depending on how much you want to be in the know, sometimes you like to spread, rumors or whatever to other people, not knowing if it's actually how somebody is or how somebody feels or what really happened to somebody. And obviously coming home, I talk about how one of the main lies that I was fed from Satan was everybody is judging you. And I feel like regardless of situation, when you feel like you've let somebody down or done something that's kind of against the status quo, you feel like that a lot where, everyone's judging me. Everyone thinks that I'm this awful person. Everyone thinks that I failed. And what that does is not only does it strip you from what's, probably the truth, which is, everyone's not judging me. It's just, a few people are, but it also takes away one of the most beautiful foundations of life, which is relationships with other people. Because personally, I think that the devil, regardless of religion, regardless of beliefs, regardless of anything, he wants people to feel alone. He wants people to feel like they're on their own, that nobody likes them, nobody cares about them, that, they're just by themselves, because that's when he can really get inside their head. And that's when he can discourage and, just beat them, with whatever he uses. And so for me, that was the lie that I was fed, everyone's gossiping about you. Everyone thinks you failed. Your family thinks you failed. The Lord thinks you failed. You're not going to be a success in anything in life because of this one experience. And obviously I discount that throughout telling my story, because that's how I felt, but that wasn't the whole truth. Yes, there were a lot of people that had my back. And there were some people, that thought I had failed, even in my own family. There were a couple people that, didn't understand what I was going through. And they thought that I had just come home because I wanted to come home. And that was difficult for me. But I talk about how I work for this gentleman who is an executive in a leadership development firm. And what he basically said was, gossip is the metaphorical cancer of any organization. where if you start gossiping about people, it spreads like wildfire. And I talk about how it's also the metaphorical cancer of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's the metaphorical cancer of any religion, of any school, of any business. And what happens when people talk behind people's back, regardless of how good their intentions are, because I like to believe we all have good intentions, that it spreads falsities, false rumors, false expectations about other people who are really just trying to do their best. And so, yeah, that's
and adds on to such a difficult situation when the person's trying to heal and trying to validate it for themselves, this experience, being able to say, I know my desires there. I know I had good desires, that my body is broken. If you have a broken leg, you go to a doctor, you get it fixed, you know.
exactly.
And with mental health issues, it's almost like you said, it's almost like the Scarlet M, like nobody knows how to handle it. You kind of avoid it. Like, I don't know what's going on over there. But you also had somebody else, I cannot remember right now who it was, you can tell me, but they said to you, your parents are not God. Your leaders are not God. God is God. And I want to talk about that for a second, because you also pull that into the calling of a missionary. It comes from God, and you are very clear about, you know, in the mission call. And I love that talk from Elder Bednar, Call to Serve. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But, right in there. And I served a mission, and it says you are assigned to labor. You're called to serve and you're assigned to labor. So that expectation again of understanding that whatever your mission is, and I think we're seeing that even more than ever before, whether it's for 2 weeks, whether it's for 2 years, whatever it might be, that's your mission, and God has a plan and a purpose for you. So if you could share, you know, I thought it was interesting how you went through that experience, you came up, you're doing your best, and then you have an opportunity to go back to Estonia in a totally different realm. Share that briefly.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So basically what happened was, you know, I'd been home for about 6 months and still had no idea what I was doing with my life. You know, all that stuff I've talked about before. I just felt lost. But I decided to, with, you know, my psychiatrist and therapist help, I was still, you know, going to a therapist and seeing a psychiatrist and medication, all that stuff. With their help, I decided, you know, I'm going to go back to a semester of school while I still try to figure things out. And so as I was at school, I get a call from my sister-in-law, and she says, hey, did you know that, you know, BYU just announced that they're starting to do this internship program in the Baltic states? I said, oh my gosh, I had no idea. She said, yeah, you can decide which country you want to go to. So you could go to Estonia and do an internship for the summer. And I said, oh my gosh, no way. And so I hung up the phone, then called the dean of the international program school at BYU. And I talk about it in the book that it was actually a miracle that he picked up, because every single time that I called him after that, he was out of his office. And so it was just like, you know, no coincidence whatsoever. I called him, I said, hey, I'm currently a student at BYU, Idaho. But I'd love to do this, you know, internship program. How can I do it? He said, well, first you got to become a student at BYU. And then you apply, you'll get accepted. And then basically you just pay the fee, you decide what you want to do, and we'll take it from there. And so, you know, through the grace of God, I got my grades in a good spot, got accepted at BYU Provo, and then decided that I wanted to do an internship as a medical intern in the hospitals in Estonia. And, you know, a while ago, I wanted to pursue the medical school route and be a psychiatrist. That also helped, you know, people struggling with mental illness. That's, you know, that since has changed, but at that time, that was something I was really passionate about. And so long story short, I got to go to Estonia for 3 months. I got to learn the language. I got to, you know, go to church, meet the members, meet the people, experience just such a beautiful, fulfilling, meaningful journey that the Lord had in store for me the whole time, but which I never, ever, ever anticipated. And it just taught me such an amazing lesson that, you know, even when we think that, you know, our life has ended because a certain, you know, circumstance or condition has risen up, or we feel like we've lost all control or we've let everybody down, that there's still a huge, beautiful purpose in our life that, you know, is yet to be seen. But as we keep doing the right things, as we keep getting back up after we fall down, eventually we'll see it and we'll look back and we'll say, oh my gosh, That's why I went through that. That's why I had that difficult, soul traumatizing experience. It's so that I could do this thing that I'm doing now. And so that's what happened. It was amazing.
It's so beautiful. And again, we talk on here for those, it's a faith-based podcast, and we talk about Jesus Christ and God and Jesus Christ's atonement. And I just think, is that just not a tender mercy of God to give you full circle and get closure on that experience? And how beautiful that even the lilies of the field that it talks about, the
Yeah.
sparrow, that he knows everything and wants to heal us, we're here to go through hard things, but the healing balm of the Savior's atonement is right there for us to be able to actively use. And again, I go back to that expectation. We expect that if we start at A, we're going to end at Z. And that is not, I tell my kids all the time, I think, we think it's A plus B equals C, and it's a quadratic equation. It's like totally not what we think.
Yes.
But I love that you bring up Oliver Granger's experience in the Doctrine and Covenants, which is a scriptural text that we use. But you talk about his sacrifice was more than his increase, that was the thing that was the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you bring that up as far as culturally, what I can see that you're hoping to shift is that when people are called to a mission, they realize they're called to serve. And whatever that looks like after that, they have sacrificed and gone with a heart desiring to serve. And whatever the outcome is not as important as the willingness and the worthiness to serve. So I love that you're doing that. Tell me, as you went through this, and anyone that's listening, whether they've come home early or they have someone that they know is struggling with something like this, what tools, some of the tools that stood out to you that really helped you? You talked about therapy, and you talked about medication, and you talked about what you would love for other people to kind of understand and not gossip and things like that. Any other tools that you're like, you know what, this I realized was a big piece?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece for me was developing a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And that is universal. Doesn't matter where you're from, what you believe, what you do. Jesus Christ is the only person, the only being that really understands what you're going through. And as amazing as it is to have other people understand and, be your champion, he will always understand and be your champion, regardless of what it is that you're going through. And so I would say, obviously, if you're dealing with a medical issue or an emotional or physical issue, you definitely want to take care of those things that you need to take care of associated with that, whether, you need surgery or whether you need medication or therapy or, just to talk it out or whatever, you need to do those things. But I think just as importantly, you need to develop that relationship with Christ, because he is the one that got me through. And as you talked about, I mentioned that part in the book where I was feeling like I had failed, and I was telling my therapist, I'm a failure. I can't believe I did this, and yada, yada, yada. And he said, you know what, Drew? He said, your parents are not God. Your leaders are not God. God is God. And his opinion is the only one that matters. And so as long as he says you're good, you're good. And so I talk about how that's how I learned that I had fulfilled my full-time mission. Was I didn't learn it from my dad. I didn't learn it from my bishop. I didn't learn it from, my girlfriend or whatever. I learned it from the only one that could fill me with that peace and that assurance that really just swept across me. And that was God. And so for anyone who's struggling out there, really try and dig down deep to get to know the Savior, because he wants to get to know you just as much. And he wants you to take your burdens to him, take your fears, your weaknesses, your sins, and then he'll pick you up, and piece by piece and step by step, you'll come to understand with his help exactly why you went through it and how you can help others go through it as soon as you're done.
I love that. And that peace and assurance is gold, because no one else can give that to you, and it stays. It has that staying power, and that creates that confidence to be able to move forward into the other unknown, what's coming ahead, right? And I love that you had shared earlier, I think it was in a post that you had done with dating, that you had gone out and you were quick to mention this. You wanted to let women know right off the bat. Came home early with mental health issues, and some of their responses were less than stellar.
Yeah, I know, right?
But what if you could share quickly with your response with your wife? What was her response? I just was so touched.
Yeah, she's amazing. I told her, I said, I came home early for my mission, anxiety and depression. And she said, oh, that's cool. She said, tell me about it. What have you been up to? And so that's when I got to tell her about all the lessons I'd learned and, the things I experienced, and obviously my, going to Estonia. And so just that response, it's as simple as that. If someone tells us, that they're struggling with something or something really scary, we just need to be more sympathetic, more empathetic, and realize that, people that share these types of things with us, like whether it's, like I mentioned before, same-sex attraction, addiction, guilt, discouragement, mental illness, they're sharing something that's so deep and personal, and we have no right to turn them away. We have no right to say, suck it up, or ew, or, don't tell me that. We have no right to do that because it's none of our business. We just have to be loving and kind and generous. And just like my wife did, be like, that's cool. Thanks for telling me. Like, how's it been for you? What can I do for you? How can I help? I mean, you're such a great person. I would have never guessed. So, I'm interested to know why you told me, and, how can I help you?
I love that. And I think that key phrase that stands out to me is, tell me more about that. That's so validating to be
Mm-hmm.
seen and heard when you're in that kind of especially when you're in that kind of a emotional situation, and just need to have that validation of what you're going through. I just
Yes.
love that. I think it's fabulous. And just kind of as we wrap up here, I know that these kind of mental health issues, you have mentioned before that there's a concern about how it can lead into suicidal thoughts and ideation. If someone is listening and they're really struggling, and even kind of crossing over into that territory, is there one piece of advice or one thought that you'd want to share with them?
Yeah, I would just say reach out to somebody. A big thing with, feeling suicidal is you think that someone will judge you if you reach out, or you think that they'll turn you away or say, don't talk to me about that. You're fine. And it takes a lot of courage to reach out, but, say a prayer about who you should reach out to, and then just reach out to somebody. And it doesn't matter who it is. For me, when I was going through that, I reached out to a friend who, helped me a lot, but I would just say reach out to somebody, because that human connection can wake you up, so to speak, to, oh, okay, like I'm on this earth. I don't want to leave this earth. And so I would say, trust your instinct, reach out to somebody, and have, confidence that they'll be able to help you and love you through that.
I love that.
Reach out to me. Why not?
Yep, reach out to Drew. And speaking of, that's a perfect segue. Great love that we are sending out to everyone who has experienced this. I think all of us have either experienced it personally or have a loved one that has. And this is so good to keep this dialogue going. If people want more, where can they get your book, The Meaning of Your Mission, and where can they reach you?
Well, www.drewbyoung.com is kind of like my website. Obviously, it's on Amazon and things like that. But yeah, I'm on social media, Instagram and Facebook. My username is Mr. Drew B. Young on Instagram. And I really just try and, you've probably seen a few of my posts, try to post, positive and vulnerable and, hopeful content that people can use. And, this book is my story. And I really hope that people can just feel it and know that regardless of the challenges they face or what they're going through, that they have a mission in life, and, not just within the church, but outside the church, and they can fulfill it. And I'm there with you every step of the way.
I love it. Drew, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's such a vulnerable story, and I love how you are so openly sharing it and connecting with others, and how can we help? What can we do? And tell me more about it. So I love it. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You're amazing, Connie. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And for anyone listening, if you want to hear more, you can subscribe, you can review and rate below. And also, if you want more with the blog posts and TV, you can check it out at ConnieSokol.com and get all the goods, the freebies, the programs, the books, all of those things that we want to do to help you move forward. I think you would agree, Drew, this is the reason why all of us who are in any kind of media, meaningful media, are trying to move forward at this time in all of our lives. Positive, good, life-changing content, so that we can become happier, better people and draw closer to the things that are going to bring us the most fulfillment. So thank you so much.
Amen to that.
Thank you. And remember, today, take your next step to live a purpose-filled life.